Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome everybody to our Corporate Parenting Committee meeting. It's nice to see you all, even though it's on Skype, and thank you very much for joining us. I don't propose to go around and do our normal introductions to each other or even the icebreakers that we normally do. I will save that for when we get back into the room with each other, which I know some of you will be quite happy about. But could we please take apologies?
Yeah, we've got apologies from Councillor Hazelgrave, Heather Peat, Pauline Anderson, Sue Ann Lim, Gamal Nizza and Steve Atkinson. Oh, sorry, Steve Atkinson just has to leave early at 2 o'clock. Sorry, he's not apologising, he's here. That's it.
And what was the last one? Sorry, Lindsay.
Steve Atkinson will have to leave the meeting at 2 o'clock. He's got a prior commitment, so he's not an apology. I made a mistake. He's definitely here, but he can only stay until 2 o'clock. And that's it. Okay.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. True.
We've got tech problems. Is it just me?
No,
I think
Councillor Williams as well.
Yeah. No, I can't hear anything either.
I can hear you all.
You're back now, Councillor. So.
Hi, can you all hear me?
And now, Yvonne.
Yep.
Oh, I'm really so sorry. It's just really bad at the moment. Hopefully you can all hear me. As I was saying, I was just talking about the conversation bar. So if you do want to have anything on there, if you can put it in the conversation bar and let me come in and I'll bring you in. And if Lindsay could keep an eye on that for me, that'd be fabulous. And hopefully my IT won't go down anymore. So the next item then is late items to be introduced. I don't have any. So do we have any declarations of interest, please? I shall take the golden silence as a no. So the next item then is minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of July 2020. And I shall just bring those up. And if I take them for matters of accuracy first, please. And I'll go page by page. So page 1, page 2, page 3, 4, 5, and 6. Is everybody happy to agree those as a true and accurate record? Again, if I don't have anybody tell me any different, I shall take that as read that they are. Lovely. Thank you. And then if we can have a look then, any matters arising that aren't on the agenda from that. Again, page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Lovely. Let's get those done then. That's fantastic. Thank you very much for that, ladies and gentlemen. So the next item then is the Children in Care Council update. For this, I will hand over to Patrick, if you can take us through that, please.
Hiya, thanks a lot. So basically, we've had a couple of meetings since the last one. We've had 3. We've had July, September, and October. But for the purpose of this, we've only got July and September's what we've done. One of the things I wanted to speak about with the young people was about, obviously, would they be happy if the age range was increased to 24 from 18, and because 2 of them that are being really established and are coming up to the 18 year of age, they were really keen to continue and do that. And there was one of their suggestions is perhaps do it at a different time to the normal Children in Care Council. So you have one for the older children that are care leavers on the same day, but it just carries on from like 7 to 8:30 was one of their suggestions, which I think is a really good idea, because then we can, we have the younger children in and discuss topics that's relevant to them, and then the older children, which could be something that's not quite what you would want to discuss around younger people. So they were quite happy with that. So I think myself and Pervez are going to have a look at that to see if we can, how it's going to work and which best way to do it. But I've also now got a support officer as well to help me with that. So that's quite helpful for me, because before that I was just running it on my own with goodwill of my team to come and help along with me. But we just discussed what they were doing, and one member was waiting for the GCSE exam results and was quite worried about them. But, really well done to her, because she got quite good results. The other thing is just to say that although they're not joining me physically here with me, because but they are watching on YouTube, so they are watching it live. So
hello to them, and thank you for joining us.
So September's meeting, we introduced the new support officer. That was really good, because he's really good, really helpful, and they really welcomed him things. And then it was a sort of, what did we was looking at a consultation that we hope to run for children in care about how they've coped during lockdown. And it's one of the things is about how well we've engaged as a council to those young people through their meetings and things, because obviously we're not able to do face-to-face as well as what we'd like to, but has the virtual been the next best thing, or is there things that we could learn from it for the future? So that's something that's going to come forward, hopefully around, I think I've spoke with Heather Pete. She wanted 1 or 2 questions added in about health reviews and things like that. So once that's all done, it should be going out hopefully around Christmassy time, so it can capture them while they're on holiday and get a bit of support. The other thing that we spoke about was topics. Would they like it to be a focused topic thing and guest speakers along? Because we used to do that when we was physically meeting, but it's obviously a bit trickier when we are virtual. But they've sort of came up with a couple that they would like to see. One is from somebody from the Leaving Care team, and because obviously they're the sort of age that will be moving into the the Leaving Care team soon. And the other one was because we've got the new advocacy service that's come online, and they're going to be joining us in November, so they can ask them questions about what advocates do and how they can help. The other thing that I've been having a bit of a struggle with is getting new members to join us. So any ideas that people have, I'd be more than grateful to have. I've done mail shots out. I always go to the foster care training, so I make sure that new foster carers coming in know about the Children in Care Council. I attend team meetings, and I've also spoke with external foster agencies as well to promote it. So hopefully it's doing it, and also I've liaised with other participation officers, and it's really interesting that everybody seems to be struggling at the minute to get young people to engage. So, any ideas anybody's got, I'm more than happy to take them and try them, anything.
Yeah, I think, Patrick, I know that over the last couple of meetings and everything, you've told us all the things that you've been doing. And from my point of view, you've been doing an amazing job trying to get that going. Obviously, it's a really difficult period of time, but all I can say is keep on doing what you're doing, because you've been doing everything right and focusing on the issues that you have been doing. And again, if any of us do know of any other ways that we can assist Patrick there in helping young people come on board, happy to put those forward to Patrick. Sorry for interrupting you there,
No,
Patrick.
That's no problem. Anything. So also, just to give you a little bit of background, I have been working in residential part-time as well as doing this role, so I've actually been on a 24-hour shift today. So if I start drooping halfway through, to give me a virtual poke to wake me up. And also, one of the things that have been also about new members is the other residential homes have been very keen to join in, but I don't think the technology has been quite with them to do that. But hopefully now that they've all got new education laptops and things like that from Graham, it should be a lot easier for them to do that. So we're hoping to have more of an input from our residential homes, which we should be having that anyway. And I think that's something that they're very keen to do as well.
Brilliant.
So, and then hopefully if we can get this to the age 24, it takes away having a separate care leavers forum, because we've got an established route, and we can almost, hopefully if we can get participation up from young people, grow our own, so they're used to coming to Children in Care Council. So it's not a great thing to come to the Children in Care Council for older young people. So long term, I think we will be in a better place, but I think in the short term, we're probably going to take a little bit of pain just to get there.
Yeah. And is there anything else you need from us then in terms of moving to that age range, Patrick?
I think it's probably just to say that you're happy for it to be, and that's, I don't think there's any great, we don't have to do any, and there's nothing to say by law or statutory things that we have to do it. I think we can just adopt it and say from now on, this will be the place where Children in Care and care leavers will be.
Okay. Can I ask then the committee, is there anybody that would object to adding that in as a third recommendation there, that we extend the age range? Is there they wish to say on extending the age range?
Chair, if I can speak, Andrew.
Of course, Andrew.
Thank you. The Care Leavers Forum is something that we have probably struggled a little bit with over the past several years to get off the ground in some ways, and I know that Anthony spoke to Patrick about this in the past. So I've got no objections to Patrick's proposal, and I think actually by joining things up, it could be more successful. So I'm happy to kind of say aye to that and kind of engage Patrick with Anthony to look at how we take that forward.
Well, that's really good. Thank you, Andrew. Does anybody else like to see on that? I can see in the conversation box we've had Councillor Pegg said he's happy to agree to that. There's any objections, I suppose, would be the better question if we added that as a third recommendation.
Chairman, can I just pop in? Steve
of course.
Atkinson.
Hi, Steve.
I've put something in the chat about I'm very happy to attend one of these meetings if it's of any help. The only I've no objection to it. I think it's a great idea in terms of extending. Just want to make sure that the right safeguards are in place when you've got an age group that's pretty wide. I'm sure Patrick will do that, but I just wanted to I'd be failing my duty if I didn't make that point, Chairman.
No, thank you, Steve. Appreciate that. Thank you. So I will take it then with the. If there's nobody else wants to speak on that we add that third recommendation in. Patrick, was there anything else you wanted to add there?
No, I mean I know it's been a struggle for some of them to engage this way. Yeah. We're trying to look to try and if we can do something at Christmas to meet up, even if it's just to sit and have a meal somewhere, so we can actually physically see each other.
Yeah.
Just as a way of seeing each other, and because we're not a massive group as yet. Well, hopefully we will be soon, but at the minute, we wouldn't be contributing any social distancing or anything like that by doing something like that. So
yeah, I think obviously it is difficult times, and we obviously have to abide with whatever rules are in play at the time being, but that sounds good if you could be able to actually physically meet up. But if we can, keep doing everything that you're doing, Patrick, and thank you so much for that. Really appreciate that, because you have put so much effort into this, and to our young people as well that really enjoyed it and really want to carry on. I think actually extending the age range will be good there, because they are advocates and we'll be able to encourage other young people to get involved. Patrick, if that's what you've got there for you, is everybody happy to accept those three recommendations in the report? Yeah. And I'll just read them out. So the recommendations were to consider the content of the report and feedback, and to consider ways to encourage new members to become involved. And then the third one that we've added is to extend the age range. So is everybody happy with those three? Yeah. Excellent. Thank you very much there, then, Patrick. Appreciate that. And when you do speak to the young people, I'll wave to them now on YouTube. Thank you so much. But when you do speak to them, please can you thank them all and hope that they're staying safe, and that if they do want to drop us an email or anything about any ideas that they've got on how we can improve it, we're always open to those suggestions, if that's okay. So thank you, Patrick, and bless you for coming after you've had such a long shift. We do appreciate that.
Not a problem.
Thank you. Okay, then, if I can take us on to the next item on the agenda, then we have Andrew's with us today, Andrew Kaiser. If you can take us on to your report, Andrew, on reducing criminalisation by children in care, Concordat, and young people in care involved with YOS. So I'll hand over to you, Andrew.
Thanks very much, Chair. I'll pick out the main points of the report that are completed, because it is quite lengthy and quite detailed. So I'll kind of pick through the key points, and then if there's any time for questions, then I can take those afterwards. And really the aim of bringing the report here today was to keep the committee abreast of developments in relation to Concordat and our programme to try and reduce the unnecessary criminalisation of looked after children. And the last time I presented this report, I did suggest that I do the next update after we've got some kind of firm data from the police and from the Youth Offending Service. So we've got that now. And so since we've rolled out across all residential children's homes, DCC owned, at the start of last year, we have had some feedback. There has been a bit of a kind of the situation being undermined by COVID and by the closure of some of our internal homes. But we have got the Concordat still in place when we've reinvigorated it. So we have a steering group, a tactical group and an operational group, which are running forward with the plan. And the focus around Concordat is to make sure that those low-level offending behaviours, or behaviours that could become offending behaviours such as criminal damage, low-level assault, are dealt with by alternative means rather than criminalising looked after children. So we are very much adopting a trauma-informed approach and taking that forward across all our children's homes, YOS staff, police personnel and partner agencies. Restorative parenting, which again is another approach to making sure that we are addressing behaviour, but we're not being overly punitive with young people involved in care. And the multi-agency nature of the Concordat is also one of the kind of important things to make this a success, really. So the Youth Offending Service alongside the police, Crown Prosecution Service, Remedy, social workers, the virtual school, it's all part of very much a kind of corporate parenting, multi-agency approach to this project. And it's all underpinned by a protocol and 10-point checklist, which is in place across all the homes and partner agencies. So the pilots were delivered in the Sinfin sites, and we had some good outcomes which are outlined in the report. And as I've just mentioned, the impact this year because of COVID and the closure temporarily of some of our Sinfin homes has had an impact, but the report does outline that we've had some good outcomes from the action plan this year. So we've developed a number of things. So the Workforce Training and Development team, in conjunction with Forensic CAMS, did a great piece of partnership work where they developed a training podcast in relation to trauma-informed practice, which has been rolled out to staff across not just our services, but across partner agencies, including the police. So that was a good piece of work. We've kept the Corporate Parenting Committee abreast of the developments in relation to Concordat. We've held a residential engagement event, and that was the virtual school and residential services with young people and staff from the homes, which was a success, and we had positive feedback from young people. Both the police and CAMS have provided clarity on having single points of access for children's homes for personnel in their teams. So there's a new police missing persons team, and we've linked in with them. We've now got fast track arrangements for CAMS assessments through the YOS seconded CAMS officer. So if any young person in our care homes needs that assessment, we can identify and fast track them through. We've just put together a framework for what we're going to call enhanced case management meetings, and this will be a multidisciplinary meeting informed by a trauma-informed approach across all children in our internal residential homes. which we're just running out the framework in the next month or so. We've also had engagement with Patrick as participation lead from the residential point of view to make sure that staff are really clear on how to gather the voice of the child and use that to drive improvements in our internal residential homes. And the virtual school have developed processes to make sure that any young person that's not engaging with their enhanced care programme are referred into something called a Mentoring Plus support offer, which Graham's developed with partner agencies. And that's about making sure that young people are eased back into education in a more bespoke manner. In relation to the data, there may be some concerns from panel members that might have read the report around the police data, which tends to show or could show at face value an increased level of activity reported by the homes. But there are some kind of health warnings on that. In relation to the police did change the way they recorded reports to them at some point in the last 18 months, and that was due to a constabulary inspection. And so now when the police are receiving information, they do have more of a duty to record that information, whereas in the past they had more latitude on what to kind of record. So it has somewhat artificially inflated some of those figures. So I think we'll need to see next year's figures to look at what that kind of actual change has been. But regardless and notwithstanding that, it does seem that there's been kind of an increase in reports through to the police from our internal homes. So whilst we've got that, what it does show is that there is a high level of reports for missing persons activity, but it does show a good level of compliance with the missing protocol, which Fiona and Kelly Ormond lead on, which is, you know, a key safeguarding tool. So it makes sure it gives us some reassurance that residential staff are reporting young people when they do go missing. I think the challenge going forward is making sure that we're not reporting too quickly, that we're working in line with the protocol and in partnership with the police to make sure that call has been made once we've exhausted the missing protocol. We've looked for the young person, we've looked in the usual places that we might find them, and we're not overly reporting that information. The YOS data is a bit more promising and positive when we look at that. So at face value, you might think that that appears at odds with the police data, which shows an increase in reports and calls for service from the residential homes. I've already mentioned the way that excuse me. I've mentioned the way that sorry, I got this and stuck in my throat.
No worries.
So I've mentioned the way the police record data now, which has led to a kind of what can look like an overly inflated number of calls for service. But there's a potential that some of that is due to a lag in reporting and data going through to the YOS and the courts for offences. But what the YOS data does show us is a really strong partnership work between the YOS, court, the Crown Prosecution Service and other agencies. So what we've got in place at the court is a triage system where our court manager meets with the legal advisor and CPS, and any offences that have gone to court, which can be dealt with by alternative means, are triaged and can be dealt with outside of court through our out-of-court disposals clinic or other alternative routes. So there is really good partnership work there. So if our residential services are calling things through to the police and the police are kind of dealing with that in a certain way, what we're doing at that point in time is working between the YOS, CPS and the courts to try and divert where that is a possibility, and that is showing, the data is showing that to be a success at the moment. Also, when we looked at the number of court appearances by looked after children in the past 12 months, we'd seen that reduced by over half, and again showed the kind of positive work between the YOS and partner agencies in dealing with offending behaviour. And we also make an annual return to the Department for Education on offending behaviour by young people in care. And whilst the actual number of young people that have committed an offence had gone up, there were a number of other measures that we looked at which demonstrated that actually things had improved in relation to offending behaviour by young people who were looked after. So the proportion of young people that committed only one offence had actually increased from 22 to 57%. There was also a higher proportion of lower gravity offences committed. Now, what lower gravity offence means is a less serious offence in basic terms, and it's the way the police grade offending behaviour. So there was a reduction in more serious offences and an increase in less serious, which shows the severity of young people's offending behaviour who are looked after in our care homes and actually reduced, which is a positive. The proportion of offences that involved violence fell by 13% by looked after children, which again, very positive. And if we take those all together, what we're seeing is we're seeing less prolific, less dangerous and less violent offending by the looked after cohort in 2019-20 than in 2018-19. And that's quite a sophisticated look at the offending behaviour data really, which is really positive. So we think we're starting to get things right at the OSS side of things, and with CPS and with the courts. And the key things now around that contextual safeguarding work within the homes, around missing persons, CRE, and making sure that we get that work right. Also, the number of offences that took place actually in the care home reduced this year. So we're seeing more offending behaviour taking place out in the community rather than internal. So the challenges then in relation to Concordat that I picked up in the last year, a key one has been around getting all partners at all levels to buy into our approach around keeping families together and strong families, resilient children. From some partners in terms of a pressure to move some young people who have proved quite challenging and difficult to manage in the community. Some partner agencies want to move those young people out of area, or the use of secure accommodation before we've exhausted every possible option to engage that young person in behaviour to keep themselves safe, to keep them safe from other people's behaviour, and to reduce offending behaviour. So it's something I've kind of raised across my management and with partners as part of the Concordat tactical group. And what we're planning is a steering group at higher level management sometime before the new year. And that's to make sure that senior managers and partner agencies are really brought into the idea of keeping young people local, where their multi-agency network are wrapped around them. We can provide that direct, quick support and fast-track support in line with the Concordat principles, rather than moving young people further away where it takes longer for the social worker to respond. The multi-agency team isn't so joined up, and it doesn't always work for young people in our experience. We sometimes think there's an over-reliance on that kind of view around moving young people out of area. So I have asked tactical group members from police, CPS, from health to make sure that they cascade that information down through their organisations to make sure staff on the ground really hear that from the top, and they've got a citywide approach and vision around keeping young people local, keeping services wrapped around them, doing all we possibly can before we consider taking that kind of drastic action around out of area or secure placements really. Activity and leisure-based work with young people sometimes can be a gap. However, what we want to do is engage with something called the Youth Alliance approach in the city, which I know, Chair, is something I've kind of mentioned to you previously, and it was in its very early stages, that stage of that conversation. But it is developing quite quickly now. So this is the third sector and public bodies joining together to coordinate, join up monies, join up services together to offer distraction work in the community, some detached type youth work, some direct mentoring, and some of this could fill some of the gaps around that leisure free time offer for some of our young people in care who can sometimes congregate in areas where there's antisocial behaviour or risk of them being exploited to get involved in criminal behaviour. So that's something that's quite exciting and can join up a serious youth violence strategy alongside this Concordat strategy. So I really think that's quite exciting.
Yeah, me too, Andrew.
Embedding the Concordat principles in the reopening of homes. So we've got Rosewood that recently reopened, and I've met with the manager there, and we've got a training event being planned for all the staff there around Concordat, around trauma-informed practice, and all the key principles around keeping young people local, stronger families, all of those principles that we're trying to work as a kind of whole together for staff in that home. So we'll be doing that at Rosewood, we'll be doing that with Willows when that reopens. It's about making sure the staff buy into that as well. We have got a new action plan for 2019-2020 and 2020-2021, which is a slightly smaller plan given where we are because of COVID and the impact, but nonetheless the enhanced case management approach and making sure we build in the Youth Alliance, and we have a kind of retraining and relaunch of Concordat built into that action plan. And partners did buy into that and give us kind of pieces of work from their areas that they thought would build onto the existing work within Concordat. So that was heartening. The steering group is going to meet before the new year, and Sue Ann Lim and the Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner Kevin are going to lead on that. And we're working towards the operational group now also getting back into place now that the tactical group has met twice since the summer. And the operational group will be responsible for driving the Concordat action plan, which is the pieces of work that need to take place to make sure we continue to drive this work really. And I'm hoping we can, you know, even with COVID kind of increasing the peak and then reducing again, I'm hoping that we can just continue to drive Concordat and not have any further kind of breaks in the delivery of that.
Yeah.
So the next steps are about this review, the refresh and the relaunch, really kind of linking in with the enhanced case management meetings. There's also other work that we're doing with Remedy, which is our kind of victim restorative justice provider. And we've also started to deliver a girls group midway through this month, recognising the specific needs of females in the criminal justice system and their needs for a more relational based approach to intervention rather than a slightly different approach that kind of works better for boys and males in that system. So there is a lot of work going on which kind of joins up with the Concordat and the looked after work that we've got. And yeah, in a nutshell, that's where we are. That's our plans for the future. So I don't know if there's any kind of time for questions or thoughts, Chair.
Sure. Well, first of all, Andrew, thank you very much to you and your team for putting together such a comprehensive report and for all the work that's been put into that. So obviously there are some good news stories in there, and there are some good outcomes there. I suppose for me it's the waiting to see whether those numbers reduce in terms of the call outs that we have from the police, but I'm really encouraged to see the plan going forward. It is there, and actually some of the great work that's been going on. Happy to open up to the floor. Does anybody have any questions for Andrew on that? You're all very quiet today, or is it just me?
Can I make a comment, Chair?
Of course, Steve.
Yeah. A couple of things, as you say, a lot of very good stuff going on. So thanks for that, Andrew. One major point that you raised in section 427, 428 about the over-reliance on using secure accommodation, etc., and the message not getting through. I'm very happy to reinforce that through the Safeguarding Children Partnership, because that clearly can have a negative effect if it's handled in the wrong way. So very happy to do that when we next meet, Andrew. And secondly, I will keep an eye, as I should do, on the calls to the police just to see what the outcome of that is. It's a good start, but obviously the proof is in the evidence. Absolutely.
No, that would be appreciated, Steve. Thank you.
Yeah, very much appreciate. Thank you, Steve. I think for me, obviously, I'm really happy that we've managed to put together Concordat, and I definitely want it to continue. Obviously, COVID's had a bit of an impact there, but Andrew, again, if we can keep on getting some of those better outcomes, you know, less looked after children involved in YOS, less looked after children going through the court services, less looked after children involved in severe crimes and in violent crimes. Again, those are really good, powerful, strong outcomes for our young children. So hopefully when we have this coming back to a meeting in future, we'll see those calls for service and calls out from the police reducing as well. Fareed, did you want to come in? Councillor
Just very quickly, Yvonne. Thank you. Sure. I was wondering whether, I might have missed it, you might have outlined it, but have we got a clear baseline so that we know where we're starting, and if we come back in a year's time, we can look and see how far we've made progress and whether we are making progress at a reasonable pace or not? Because if we haven't got it, in a year's time, what will we be measuring by in terms of to assess success or lack of it?
Yeah, the OSS data has been benchmarked against last year, so the figures there are benchmarked against last year, so it shows the improvements and reductions. This is the first year of rollout across all 4 of our internal mainstream children's residential homes. So this is the benchmark data, if you like, in relation to the 4 homes. So in the 2021 report next year, what you'll see is a comparison of police call-outs from this year compared to next year. And the OSS data has already been benchmarked against the previous year, so you'll have again another comparative set of data for the OSS.
Is that okay, Fareed? Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. I mean, as long as that data is made available next time when you come to report, or next year when you are doing an annual report, just to give an idea of how far things have moved on in that direction, or good, right direction.
Yeah, we've got a really good link with the police around performance data, so we managed to get this year's data, so I don't see any kind of reason for as to a problem getting next year's data at all, really.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else got a question for Andrew? No. If I can ask everybody then to accept the recommendation at 2.1, which is to ensure Corporate Parenting Committee are kept abreast of developments, progress and impact of the Concordat programme to date. Is everybody happy to accept that recommendation?
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And again, Andrew, can you please say thank you to all the teams that help you with that, and thank you very much for putting together the report.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. The next item then on our agenda is we have Mandy with us to take the report, CSE and Children in Care report. I can hand over to Mandy.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mandy McDonald. I do have the PowerPoint to share, if that's okay, Chair. I can share my screen.
Absolutely. No, that's great.
Unless Lindsay would be sharing.
Hi, yeah, bear with me. I'll put it up for you, Mandy.
Thank you. Whilst Lindsay's doing that, I'll just say I'm a child protection manager. And I am part of the quality assurance team, and within that we chair all complex meetings, all child protection meetings, and things like local authority designated officer meetings as well. But part of my role, so 40% of my role, is also to lead the strategy around children at risk of exploitation. So for the report today, what I'd like to do is focus on 5 key points. So I want to talk about the changes to the strategy since 2017. I want to give you a brief summary of some data over the past year and the preceding year, so that you can see the difference in numbers referred and types of things we're dealing with. I want to talk about how we respond to some of the cases, about the commission services that we have. I have got a small amount of information about the impact of COVID on children who are on the CRE strategy, and then to give you a brief overview of any kind of strategy in respect of regional work and local multi-agency partnership work, which is obviously governed through the Vulnerable Young People's Group. So to begin with, I'll go over the changes to the strategy and why they happened. So people who've been around for quite some time might know that the strategy used to be called the Child at Risk of Sexual Exploitation Strategy. And in 2017, we began to review our work in context to the serious violence strategy and violence against women and girls. And at the time, we'd had reports from the government in 2014 and again in 2018 about the rise of criminal exploitation, and that it has such a multifaceted issues that we needed to start thinking about incorporating that within our strategy. So that's what we did. We then renamed the strategy Children at Risk of Exploitation, so that we can incorporate all forms of exploitation. And if Lindsay moves to slide 2, these are examples. It's not an exhaustive list, but these are examples of the types of exploitation and the context in which they happen that we are reviewing here in Derby and across the region related to regional work that we complete. And it's also really important to reflect on the fact that these issues were already being dealt with through a range of forums, but they weren't managed collectively through a child protection framework, and that's what we were hoping to achieve by incorporating them into the exploitation strategy, so that we coordinate responses, close the gap between any criminal justice and welfare responses to children and victims or those at risk, and frame criminal exploitation within an exploitative context to apply a welfare-based perspective to the work for all agencies involved. So that was the purpose of changing the name. And I think you'll see when we move on, but not just yet, to the data, that's reflected in the data in the difference of cases that are referred to us, but I'll come on to that in a moment. So if you look on this slide that's on the that you should be able to see now, on the left-hand column we have the context in which some exploitative harms happen. So it might be child on child, it might be adult on child, it might be group or individually based. It might also be linked to organised crimes, and I think most of us will have heard the term criminal exploitation or county lines, and those are the sorts of things that we're referring to in there. But we must not lose sight of the fact that we also have a growing problem with online use, particularly in light of COVID lockdown and increased internet use. And we also have interfamilial contexts where there are harms to children that are exploitative, and they might be reviewed through previously something like PREVENT or honour-based violence strategies, and the wider context of modern slavery and human trafficking. So, but most of the issues that we are dealing, or most of the cases, should I say, that we're dealing with in Derby relate to exploitative risks external to the family home. So important to reflect on that. The types of exploitation, well, sexual, criminal, there's a number of different criminal offences. That might be a child forced to commit shoplifting or other forms of acquisitive crime. It might be drugs related, it might be weapons and serious violence related. We are also looking at that through the lens of contextual safeguarding. Contextual safeguarding, I think that's a big professional word. So just put some context on that. It's about extrafamilial harm to children and young people. And there are three core ideas around contextual safeguarding. The belief that changing contexts of where harm happens is possible, so that we focus on the settings and the environments as much as the individuals or the other factors that cause risk to a child. That contextual safeguarding is anti-oppressive practice and an approach that's anti-oppressive within safeguarding. That it's centrally located within child protection frameworks to focus on extrafamilial harm, and a recognition that the harms occur in an interaction between choice, structural and environmental constraints. So, as I say, it's quite a complex piece of work, but I'll come on to discuss that a little bit more later on. And then in the right-hand column, what you'll see is we try to respond in a multi-agency partnership way. So we've commissioned services, which I will talk about in a moment. We've got added value from local services who also link in through our Vulnerable Young People's Partnership, but also through other forums like police tasking meetings. And then we also link with regional partners to look at cross-border work and also to review training. We're currently reviewing a risk tool that might be embedded across the region so that there's a consistent response to children and young people who might go missing. So if I come to the data, which is on the next slide. Thank you, Lindsay. So you'll see in the left-hand column, we've got the data from last year. So we run from April to March, and we had 102 cases that were worked throughout the year. 53 of them were new referrals and 49 were already open, so legacy from previous year. 43 cases were closed in the year, and of those, and I think you're most interested in this figure, 15 of those were looked after children, and there were 4 from other authorities, so placed in Derby, but we don't have responsibility for them. If you look below that, the type of exploitation we recorded within this year is child criminal exploitation, which could be a range of factors. It's very rare for a child to present with one risk or one issue. It's more, I think, likely that they will present with more than one concern. So we will always, that's why we work in a multi-agency way, so that we can respond to all of those needs of a child. Then we have 49 child sexual exploitation cases, and that relates to offline and online harm. And then we have 8 that are considered to have elements of both sexual and criminal exploitation related to them. Now, unfortunately, the next column on the right there, we have given you the figures from the previous year, but we've changed the way that we collate data, so we're not able to give you the reflection on the types of cases recorded, but hopefully we'll be able to moving forward. You'll see that there's been a reduction in the number of cases that have been referred in the year in total, but there is a concerning trend that relates to an increase in the numbers of criminal exploitation cases. I want to assure you, and I think we can mitigate some of the concern around this by the fact that we have changed our whole strategy in order to reflect and bring in those other cases. So it's not a surprise that we're getting more referrals for criminal exploitation, because that was the whole purpose of opening up the strategy. But we are seeing a rise in respect of criminal exploitation cases beginning to overtake those that are child sexual exploitation. So we want to monitor that to make sure that we don't have children who are at risk of sexual exploitation sidelined to focus on those other matters. The concerns for looked after children have been far less of a feature in our data, but there is a risk trend within that group of missing episodes of cannabis use, and there are many links to antisocial behaviour. That again is not unusual, because this is a group with increased vulnerability, so it's likely that they are targeted for those reasons, for those vulnerabilities. What I can say, that only 5 children from Derby were reviewed for high risk, which in context to the other numbers is a low number, and 3 of those were from out of authority and being reviewed here. And 4 of those cases were closed over the year because the risk reduced, and the children had an improved understanding of the risks. Those numbers include the 6 who were out of authority children, and they were reviewed as a reciprocal arrangement. So within the region, what we hope to do is, because services are addressing issues locally, we usually pick up each other's cases in respect of holding child exploitation meetings, because it's easier to coordinate that support with the agencies in situ. But we maintain responsibility for those cases, as do the other authorities. But it is a very useful and I think worthy sort of reciprocal arrangement. I think we have to reflect on the next point, which is what we also do to mitigate the risks for the children. So we have commissioned services in Derby that are Derbyshire Cares, I think is the tag that most people will understand, or Catch 22, and they work with up to 50 young people in a year, and they can provide one-to-one support, and it can be quite intensive or less intensive depending on the presenting needs. And that's a 3-way commissioning from the Police and Crime Commissioner, Derbyshire Local Authority and Derby City Local Authority. So they also work with, I think it's 40 cases in Derbyshire every year as well. We also have added value to the support that we're given. So Safe and Sound is a local organisation that's been around for many years, and they are providing support to low-level cases. So whereas Catch-22 will work with medium and high-risk cases, what we're hoping to do is improve earlier responses, because we know the earlier that we get involved, the better the outcome for the child, and the more likelihood of reducing risk. So Safe and Sound are doing some early prevention work with young people where they have some identified needs, but they're not at a level that would be concerning, and they don't fit the threshold for social care frameworks. And that's working really well because they're also linked into our vulnerable young people strategy. I said to you earlier that what I wanted to do was give you an overview of how COVID is impacting on young people who are on the strategy. Now, I'm not speaking for all the young people on the strategy, but I did, in line with the Vulnerable Young People's Group, obtain some views from young people. And we are concerned that the COVID restrictions are being used sometimes to support avoidant behaviours. So, preventing social workers from visiting or not being able to engage with the work that's provided virtually, or there are cases where the significant risk is there, and therefore we try to do doorstep visits. The challenge with doorstep visits is that you can't do quality work, you can't do confidential work, and there's a lack of confidentiality, so you're limited to what you can discuss with a child. But we are making every effort to engage parents and children in our virtual meetings to ensure that they can give their views and that we do hear the concerns. We are also, I've also got feedback from the young people. So one of these was a looked after child, so I think it's important and obviously fits with the theme of today. One child was asked what the impact of COVID had been for her. She said that I just feel flat. I can't get out of bed sometimes, and sometimes I'm okay. When asked if the work about exploitation and risk of exploitation and support from health professionals had helped, she said it has helped a bit, but it's hard talking on the phone, it gets a bit boring, and it's tough to keep listening. And what she was saying is that, it's not just one professional having a virtual meeting with her, it's several. And so after a while, it becomes the same old, and she feels like she's listening all the time rather than having an interaction. And then she did reflect on what was happening for her practically, and she said, you don't do much, do you? And it's because of COVID. But she prefers going out and seeing people properly, was her view. Then generally, feedback's been varied about COVID. We've had some that discussed feeling isolated. Some young people talked about boredom and isolation, feeling frustrated with the lockdown. 3 of the cases were referred for counselling support because of those low moods identified in those discussions. But conversely, and I think this is important because it shows the individualism of children really, one child reported that the restrictions were good because it helped her improve her relationship with her mum. So, it has good and bad outcomes for children. I think in COVID, it's really clear that there's a pattern of behaviour of certainly young men involved in antisocial behaviour and at risk of criminal exploitation, not observing the restrictions, and 2 of those children are in care. And they're responsible for many of the reported episodes in the children's homes. So whilst missing episodes, which Andrew talked about, might appear high at times, it is limited to, quite a small number of children. But I think the risks also then extend to not only the risk of exploitation, but their risk of bringing back some form of infection and infecting others. That's other children, carers, professionals who have contact with them. So there has been some unease about that lack of the failure to observe those restrictions. In March, or April, I did, with my head of service, create a CRE COVID plan that went out to all professionals. And It was to show what support's available to children, so the offer, and I've used the supporting documentation to show you the offer to children and parents through the strategy. I've also ensured that there have been monthly updates through a newsletter type email that goes out to all designated safeguarding leads in schools, but also have been sending that on to CRE champions, and more recently onto the heads of service, deputy heads of service, sorry, so that they can cascade more widely within their areas. And within that, there's a host of information about where to get support, resources to use during COVID, virtually and, directly. And I think, that has helped somewhat to show that there is quite a lot of work still going on, and that there's a lot you can still do with children, even if it's virtual. But we have moved now more recently towards face-to-face visits again, and I think we're seeing a better engagement with those on the strategy. I've also looked at the regional work that we complete. So just to give you a brief overview of that, we are really focused on aligning the risk assessments that we use to measure the risk to children professionally, so that we do have that consistent response across borders to children who live within the region. Within that, we've developed what we call the 5 Ps, prevention, protect, it's partnership. There's various elements to it that focus on bringing together work of multi-agency partners and ensuring that we have a good response across the region to prevention, protection, prosecution and partnership work. And Pursue is the final one, and Pursue is about the helping to prosecute offenders and a strict focus on offenders as well. We also have licensed services working with us, quite widely to disrupt any contextual risk within licensed premises or through licensed individuals. So, if we get weekly licensing updates and daily licensing updates that tell us about incidents within licensed premises, and I review those every day to ensure there's no child protection matters being raised within them. And they go out when regularly with police licensing. And we do the Say Something If You See Something campaign. So we've been running that since 2011. And that's to help licensed premises understand their responsibility in protecting children from exploitation and other forms of harm in their premises. In terms of training, so obviously training's been put on hold whilst the boards merge. So we've got the Derby and Derbyshire Safeguarding Children partnerships merging, but in order to ensure that there is still training offered, there has been some virtual training organised. So a training course on child criminal exploitation will be delivered on the 12th of November. I think we've got 50 participants on that so far and 20 on the waiting list. So, there's a good kind of audience for it. And we've also done a session within children's homes with children's homes manager and their head of service about developing a piece of work to work with children on understanding stereotypes, understanding how they impact on their daily choices and understanding the risk to criminal exploitation. The feedback from that was very positive, but I think what was really clear was the managers would prefer if myself or another champion could come in and deliver that, but they are willing to cascade that throughout the homes, and I think it's really important given that their children in care are a vulnerable group. And then moving forward, the DDSCP are building a training programme now and offering some virtual training, but the exploitation courses will be delivered as of next year. I've also been working to deliver courses directly with children. So actually just the day before we went into lockdown in March, I delivered a session with the Voices in Action group. And that's because those children had asked for an overview of child criminal exploitation. And the second session was delivered through another professional, but it was contextual safeguarding, and both I think were really well received, and you know, the young people thought that they were valuable and got something from them. So and it's important that they understand current trends and that we dismiss some of the stereotypes and risks that they may fear. So the theme of this report is safety, and I think there's no doubt that agencies across Derby are aware of child exploitation as a child protection concern, and that they're committed to safeguarding children and young people. There are limitations to what coordinated work can be achieved through virtual meetings and virtual strategies, so that requires broader development to be more reflective. We have to take into consideration the children's feedback, and I think the sooner we get back to full-time face-to-face working, then the better opportunities for engagement and interventions. The local and regional strategies do aspire to have that consistent approach, and there is, you know, I think very good work going on in the background to ensure that that happens, but also to focus on prosecution and disruption of offenders, because that's really important. And we are looking to implement the contextual safeguarding framework within all of our work, and there is you know, work underway in order to do so across the whole of the social care system, I think. Then children have a clear pathway to support. Children have a voice in meetings. They have the opportunity to speak independently to chairs. Children in care have advocates. I think it's really clear that, you know, we're doing everything in our power to safeguard them from exploitation, but also to educate them about the risks. And I'm absolutely certain that everyone's aware that we will never be complacent. We know that we need to be consistently vigilant and consistently developing our strategy in order to meet the issues and trends that we are observing, both nationally and within our own demographic. Thank you. Have we any questions?
Wow, thank you so much, Mandy. I mean, obviously, this is a really complex issue, and made even more complex by COVID. But I think reading through the report and also looking at the appendices that you'd sent through to us, one of the questions I was going to talk about, but you have answered, was about the reciprocal arrangements, and I'm actually quite assured by what you've said to us today that those arrangements are in place and are working, because that was a concern for me when I was reading the report. So thank you for giving us those assurances there, and also in terms of the avoidant behaviour, are we able to sort of keep records of what kinds of avoidant behaviour and how much, whether there's been peaks and troughs of that, Mandy?
Not at the moment, and it's not the kind of data that we would collate within child protection meetings.
No.
But it is something that we'll monitor on an individual basis. And I think for all of these cases, the key is to be persistent and to build a relationship with the child, and then that should hopefully mitigate the risk of the avoidant behaviour. But it's also about engaging the families and finding out where they're going and disrupting those individuals or places of risk as well. So that it might be, you know, it might be that it's an environmental matter that we need to deal with rather than an individual. Right. But we will monitor that and deal with it through each individual plan.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Have we got some questions, Mandy? Danielle? Councillor Lind?
Hi, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mandy. That was really informative. Thank you for all the hard work you've done. I'd just like to ask, is there a clear mental health pathway that professional workers can access for children at risk of exploitation?
Yes, there are quite a number in Derby actually. We've got obviously a CAMHS Rise service, which is what we would call our emergency response. So any child can present at A&E and have a consultation with a CAMHS worker, usually within sort of 6 to 12 hours. But they would be monitored through the children's emergency department if risks were high enough that we were concerned about them. And then there are a number of voluntary sector agencies that provide support. And as I said, we've already on individual plans identified that the child's low mood needs some form of input that's a professional or a skilled therapeutic input, so they're delivered through usually voluntary sector. But education also have, there's quite a few schools in Derby that have bought in commissioned services for dealing with those kinds of issues as well, so children and young people often have access to those. We've got things like the Building Sound Minds project, so yes, there's a lot out there for children and young people.
Okay, thank you, Mandy. Could I also ask, is there a push towards getting more professional one-to-one with children, whether it be walking through the park or attending school? Because there seems to be that real push for children to be wanting that connection and to actually talk to adults and talk about it, which seems to be really lacking with the virtual world we're all living at the moment.
Yes, definitely. And actually we had a directive, I think it was last week, about moving back towards face-to-face rather than doorstep visits. So definitely. And we have also, where possible, we've socially isolated and had those conversations in the park. But it's the lack of confidentiality that's the key issue, because we can't discuss the real concerns. We just have to mentor and monitor and, those kinds of things.
Okay. Thank you, Mandy. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks for your question, Danielle. Do we have any other questions for Mandy? No. Again, thank you so much, Mandy. Really appreciate all the work that's gone into that, and really hope that we can do much more face-to-face and the future changes for us all there. So thank you so much again, and can you please pass on our thanks as a committee to your teams for us? Much appreciated.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
On that, can we just make sure everybody's happy with the recommendations for the report? It's 2.1 and 2.2.
Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you, Councillor Thane. Appreciate that. So we'll accept those recommendations there. Next item then on the agenda, if we can move on then, is the report of children in care educational attainment. And I'll hand over to Graham for this.
Hi, good afternoon everyone. Thank you, Chair.
Good afternoon.
This is a much shorter report than I would normally give at this point of the year, and all will become clear as I go through the report, and I'm sure many of you will know the reasons why that is. So, as you will know, all of the exams were cancelled last summer, so there is actually no published data. Ofsted will not use any of the outcomes from last summer in terms of any of their inspections, so any of the results shown in this report are purely for internal use only, if that's okay. As it says in the report, in primary schools we don't have any data. All of the phonics, the Key Stage 1 and the Key Stage 2 SATs didn't take place. They are trying to catch up with the phonics results after October half term in the next 2 or 3 months, but as yet there are no data. For secondary schools, you'll have seen during the summer the backwards and forwards about what results were going to be used for GCSE grades, a bit of a national fiasco really, but what we've ended up with is secondary schools used teacher assessment grades to award the GCSE grades and A-level grades for our young people, and that's what I've been able to pull together in this report. Obviously, March time next year I normally have a fuller set of data, and I'll present, if I can, a bit of a fuller report at that point. But what I wanted to do in 4.1 of the report was just outline some of the changes for last year's Year 11 cohort compared to other year groups in previous years. So I've got a bit of a 3-year trend. So back in 2018, we had 25 Year 11 youngsters in what we call the reportable cohort. Now, the reportable cohort is those youngsters who have been in care for 12 months or more on the 31st of March. So in 2018, we had 25 youngsters. 2019 there was 26, but last year we had quite a significant jump up to 36 youngsters in the reportable cohort, and the graph there in 4.1 shows that, but it also shows the youngsters in each reportable cohort and what their special educational needs profile was, and as you can see there, in 2020 we more than doubled the numbers of youngsters who had special educational needs. So the youngsters who had education healthcare plans went from 7 in 2019 up to 14 in 2020, and those on SEN support, a slightly lower level of SEN, but still quite significant, went from 5 up to 11. And the number of youngsters who didn't have any SEN actually dropped from 14 in 2019 down to 11 in 2020. And it's important, and I say this every year when I present the report, it is very cohort dependent, the results. And the numbers of SEN youngsters certainly has an impact on the percentages that we look at. So if we move to 4.2, that just outlines in percentage terms that in 2019 46% of the cohort had some form of SEN. Last year in 2020 that jumped to almost 70%. If you actually look at the youngsters in 2020 who didn't actually have any SEN, there was 11 of those. Out of those 11, 2 of them were unaccompanied asylum seekers who had very little English, but didn't have any diagnosed SEN. So in terms of those youngsters gaining GCSE grades, that was going to be pretty much impossible because they came with very little English, if any English. So although it says 11 with no SEN, we're actually down to 9 there. So a significant number of SEN pupils. But then if we come to the Maths and English results, these at Corporate Parenting Committee before, we've explained the new GCSE grading system. So we've moved away from the 5 A to C's, including English and Maths. We're now on a numbered grading system, with 9 being the top grade down to a grade 1. The old grade C is, if you just scrape into a grade, an old grade C, that is a grade 4 in the new system. Which is a standard pass. If you got a grade 5, that is a good pass, at a good C grade pass. So what I've done here is I've just given you the last 3 years worth of data in terms of the numbers of youngsters who attained a grade 4 and a grade 5 English and Maths GCSE. And as you can see, the Englishes grade 4 and above have gone from 6 to 8 to 9, so an improving picture there. Those with a grade 5 or above, the same as last year, 7 youngsters out the cohort got a grade 5 or above. Maths, a similar picture. Improvement from 2018, the same numbers getting the Maths grade 4 and the Maths grade 5. But if again, when you look at it in terms of the percentage of the whole cohort, it does show that the percentages have gone down. So the percentage of youngsters who achieved a GCSE grade 5 or more went down from 26.9% last year down to 19.4%. But again, that's all in the context of a larger cohort number with a much higher incidence of SEN. In terms of Attainment 8 and Progress 8, Attainment 8 and Progress 8 measures the attainment and progress over a youngster's best 8 subjects. And we don't have that data yet. I'm hoping that we will be able to source some of that data. But again, it won't be published nationally. But again, when I come back, maybe in February, March time, I'll be able to present some of that. Now, I think that is quite important because one of the targets for the virtual school this year was to improve the Attainment 8 and the Progress 8 scores to at least bring them up to national. Because if you remember, in 2019, we had some exceptional results and we did really well. But our Key Stage 4 results weren't as good as we wanted them to be. They were okay, but they weren't quite at national. So what we'd done in 4.5 to try and improve our Attainment 8 and our Progress 8 scores was we had enlisted the support of some trainee teachers from Nottingham University. So back last year in October 19, I went to do a lecture about virtual schools and looked after children to trainee teachers at Nottingham University. And at the end of that presentation, I said to them, I would like to enlist some of their support to do some virtual learning for some youngsters who were on the grade 3, grade 4 borderline. And at that point, that was quite innovative. But obviously the world has moved on since that point, and we're all quite accustomed now to online learning. So it was quite innovative at the time.
Well done for being innovative at the time, Graham. It was totally ahead of the curve there.
A bit ahead of the curve. But I think although we didn't have exams to prove the impact of that work, when I look back at the youngsters who had that support, they all got at least a grade 4 in the subject that they had their online additional support in. So I'm taking that as a bit of a win. Although so I was really pleased with that.
Well, I think that stands for itself, Graham. You know.
Yes. Yeah. I was really pleased with that. I was disappointed that we couldn't have the actual exams taking place and then really validating that. And it's interesting, this year I was asked to do a similar lecture to the next cohort of Nottingham University students, but I had to do that virtually, so I had to send them something for them to deliver virtually. So I haven't actually been able to go and do it face to face, which again would have been better. And I've probably got about half the number of youngsters or trainee teachers, half the number of trainee teachers come back to me to say they want to be involved this year. But I will have another go at using those trainee teachers again this year.
Sounds like a really good plan and outcome there with that.
Yes,
trainee teachers,
it was good. And then just lastly, we normally have at least one Year 11 youngster who does exceptionally well. This year we had 2, and I've just outlined what their grade profiles were across all their subjects. And by anyone's standard, pupil A and pupil D there, really good results, and both in local Derby secondary schools as well, which was really pleasing. So so I'm afraid that's it. I'm afraid in terms of the outcomes. I can hopefully bring a fuller report in February, March time.
Again, thank you very much, Graham. Appreciate that. And we know how difficult it has been, and the changes that you and the team have had to go through with our children as well to actually accomplish that. So appreciate that. I'd like to open the floor there to anybody that wishes to ask Graham any questions there about this report and the cohort. Any questions? No. if I can take us to the report recommendation then, is to recognise the achievement of Derby's children who are looked after. And absolutely, I think that's been, you know, in such difficult circumstances, but also on top of the work that you and the team have done in the last couple of years. I am really pleased with what is coming out in the terms of those results.
Lovely.
And it will be interesting to see if this new cohort of trainee teachers is able to have as much influence now that the children are being more used to online learning
absolutely.
again.
Yeah,
so that'd be
absolutely.
a really interesting one to watch. But if we're happy to accept that recommendation, is everybody happy to accept that recommendation there?
Yeah.
And again, thank you, Graham. If you can pass on our thanks to your team, because I know they've worked extremely hard this year to help all our young people. So again, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham.
Thanks.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda then, we have Pervez with us to do the independent reviewing service. Pervez, if I can hand over to you.
Well, hi, good afternoon, everybody. I hope everybody can hear me loud and clear. Thank you, Councillor Williams. Obviously, you've had a copy of my annual independent reviewing service report for 2019. It's a statutory requirement for me as manager of the independent reviewing service to do an annual report around the activity of the IRO service and present that to the corporate parenting committee. I'm hoping members of the committee will be aware of the independent reviewing officer and their role. It's a statutory role which has been in place for about 18 years. It came as part of the Adoption Act 2002, and it's a statutory requirement for every child that comes into care to be allocated an independent reviewing officer. The independent reviewing officer has a number of roles, and this is in addition to each child having a social worker as well. The independent reviewing officer is an independent person, and they have a number of roles, but in particular, it's to chair their statutory reviews. There is a requirement to have statutory reviews at set timescales, and the role of the independent reviewing officer is to chair those statutory reviews. As well as that, the independent reviewing officer monitors and tracks the care plan for the young person, builds a relationship with the young person, ensures that young person's wishes and feelings are taken into account in relation to the care plan, and the care plan is appropriate. So it's a very important role that the IRO undertakes, and as I say, it is a statutory role, and you know, in terms of the work, it's quite comprehensive and important. What I've done is I've done a bit of a PowerPoint presentation which I've focused on the key highlights, and I'll go through those over the next 5 or so minutes really. I'm hoping members of the committee have had an opportunity to read the annual report, and will be able to kind of raise any issues or questions at the end of my presentation. One of the key things that the committee members would have noted is the increasing numbers of children in care that we've had in Derby. At the end of 2019-20, we had 588 children in care compared to 562 in 18-19 and 491 at the end of 17 and 18. I've just looked at some data this afternoon, and at the beginning of this week, we had 639 children. So it's an increasing number of children in care. So I'm just seeing if somebody's got a note there. Yeah, we've got an increasing number of children in care, and obviously that impacts on the workload of the independent reviewing officers. Derby's not on its own in terms of the increasing numbers of children in care. I've had I liaise with our regional partners on a regular basis, and the trend around increasing numbers of children in care is a national trend. Obviously, each local authority is working on that, trying to address those issues and trying to meet those challenges. And we in Derby are working hard to ensure that the right children are in care, and also furthermore that, you know, in terms of their plans for permanence are executed as quickly as possible. So they come in, and then we are working hard to ensure that those young people are moved on, and the independent reviewing officers have a very critical role in doing that. And you know, it's something that we talk about regularly, and it's something that I've liaised and talked to Andrew Kaiser about, obviously in his role as head of children care service. So working very closely to make sure that, you know, the right number of children in care, and when they are in care, that we're moving those young people on appropriately to permanence. In terms of the independent reviewing service, the IROs, it's a stable and experienced staff group, although over this last year we have had some workforce challenges. So we've managed that as a team and been able to kind of address the challenges that have arisen from that. There has been some implications around that. My IROs, we've been an IRO down, so other IROs have had to increase their workload and kind of meet those challenges. But we've done it very positively and very successfully. But it has impacted on our timeliness of our reviews, which is slightly down to 92.7% compared to 96.4% in 2018-19. Our target is 97%. I think it was an excellent result given the challenges that we've had in terms of staffing, that we were still well above 90% in terms of making sure our reviews are on time. I am working hard to recruit. I've got an advert out at the moment for another independent reviewing officer, and working hard to get our staffing back up to the levels that it should be, and confident that will increase over the next year. So really positive, and kind of carrying on to working around that. One of the things that we in the independent reviewing service is really proud of is our kind of enthusiasm and our kind of success around getting young people involved in their review and getting them to participate in their reviews. And generally in Derby, we're very good at that. Over 2019-20, 97.5% of our reviews had young people participating in them. So this was a slight increase from 2018-19. Our target is 97%. So that's really positive. It shows that we engage young people. Young people are able to express their wishes as part of the review process, and that they're involved in their care plans, which is really, really positive, and something that should be celebrated, and really positive around that. And the other thing that I've been working on, and I think is really positive, is trying to collect feedback from young people and parents and carers as part of the review process. So at the end of the review, I've got a set questionnaire which the IROs try to get feedback from young people and parents around their experience of the review process. How was the review for them? Were they able to say what they wanted? Did they feel that they were heard? Were they able to participate appropriately? Was there anything that they would have wanted done differently? And generally the feedback from the review process and from that feedback from parents, young people and carers is excellent. I've got a short section in the IRO report around that, and as members of the committees will have noted, that's really positive feedback. It's something that we're building on, and I want to collect more feedback and for more young people. But generally, as I say, the feedback that we get is very positive, which is, I think, a reflection of the hard work that the IROs do in involving young people and actually chairing reviews in an appropriate way, where young people, parents and carers feel involved and able to participate and kind of give their views as well. The other positive, which I noted as part of doing my report, is the reduction in the number of unaccompanied asylum seeker children from 2018-19 to 2019-20. The committee will be aware that we've had various discussions over the last couple of years around the increasing numbers of unaccompanied asylum seeker children, and in particular the impact of Laverstoke, which was a dispersal centre that was set up in Derby a couple of years ago. And as a result of that, we had a really high number of young people coming into care where there were discrepancies around their age. They were saying, we're under 18, and Derby City Council was having to do age assessments, and that resulted in an increase of young people in our care. There's been some positive developments around that, national developments in terms of age assessments and at Board of Entry. I think instead of 18, it's now 25 where the age is assessed, so that's resulting in less discrepancy in terms of the people that are dispersed to Derby in terms of their age being a question. So we've had a reduction to 27 at the end of 2019-20, and my understanding is, certainly in relation to the number of children that I see coming in, that's continued to reduce and stabilise, which is really positive in terms of the work that we're doing around young people who are unaccompanied. So that's positive, and obviously in terms of Laverstoke getting their systems right as well, that I think that's positive on that front as well. Within the report, I've done a section around health assessments, dental checks and SDQs. Again, that continues to be positive in the high 90s. There have been, a slight changes, kind of 0.11%, but generally we in Derby do very well around that, work very closely with our LAC nurses, our designated LAC nurse, and we've been working really hard around making sure the strengths and development questionnaires are done, and we've made a lot of progress around that, linking that with health assessments, making sure young people are getting the right support and help, and in terms of having a coordinated approach around their health needs. So that's really positive. One of the big challenges that we've all had, and we in the IRO services had at the latter end of 2019-20, is the impact of COVID. And obviously that's impacted on how we undertake our reviews. We weren't able to carry on doing reviews on a face-to-face meeting basis, and we've had to embrace, as we all have, e-technology. And the IROs, I'm sure, along with everybody else, had a very steep learning curve in terms of how we embed that. But I'm pleased to say that as an IRO service, we initially started using Skype and had our IRO reviews via Skype, involve young people, involve parents, and that's worked particularly well. We're not always able to have one big meeting, so it may be sometimes a series of meetings. But again, I did a small piece of work where we gathered feedback from parents and young people, and the feedback from that was very positive. So we continue to develop that. At the moment, all our reviews, due to the restrictions and due to the risks, are still electronic, and we continue to use Skype. We continue to use Microsoft Teams, continue to use the phone, and young people, the feedback is generally positive. Young people are still continue to contribute to feedback, to be involved. Parents and carers have now, I think, got used to participating in meetings online, and that's working well. Obviously, it's something we'll continue to review in line with national developments, but at the moment, due to the high risks, and obviously with our children placed, many in Derby, many out of Derby as well, and the different restrictions in the different cities, we're not able to kind of do face-to-face meetings, but as I say, we will continue to review that over the coming months. And finally, the continuing challenge of increasing numbers of children in care. As I said, that's an ongoing challenge, not just for us in Derby. It's a national challenge and regional challenge as well. We in the IRO service are acutely aware of that. There isn't any issues around thresholds. All the children that come into care, we've had various discussions and looked at that. They are the right children. They've come in for the right reasons, and the role that we as our IRO service have is about making sure that their permanence plans are pushed as quickly as possible. So, in terms of moving on, whether that's adoption, whether that's into extended family and friends, or whether that's original done swiftly and appropriately, and that young people's wishes and feelings are taken into consideration. We'll continue to work with operational services around that and continue to challenge, where there's drift and delay. That's all I had to say in terms of the highlights. I'm happy to take any questions and comments from the committee.
Thank you very much, Pervez. A lot of information in there and in the appendix as well. Thank you so much. I think for me, obviously, you just touched on there the increase in numbers of looked after children coming, and again that assurance there that we've got the absolute right thresholds there. I suppose my then next question along there is, I know that you're out to recruit again. Are you satisfied that you have the right the resources and the right staffing levels there to be able to cope with that increased demand, or is that something that we need to look at now?
I think obviously we've had the challenge, and I've highlighted that in the report. I have, as you say, Councillor Williams, got an advert out. I'm confident that once we're fully staffed, we will have the right capacity to manage the demand, really.
Okay, I think I would ask from the committee's point of view, if that does change, if you can let us know as soon as possible again. So I think that's something we'll keep an eye on, particularly if those numbers do keep rising. I'm happy to open up to the floor to ask Pervez any questions there. Anybody there? wanting to ask any questions? See, Councillor Lind is typing. Did you want to come in, Councillor Lind?
Hi, I think you've asked my question. Hi.
Okay.
I think you asked my question actually, Yvonne. And yeah, if you could keep the board up to date with how it's going to ensure that there's appropriate capacity to meet the needs of the service, I think that's key here, and that's really important. Thank you, Pervez.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Dan. Now, and again, I think for me, the participation, that 97.5%, again, that's really good credit to the team for getting that, because we all know how difficult it is sometimes to get the participation. So again, I'm really pleased with that and with the outcomes that the team are getting. So again, if there's no more questions from the board, first of all, I'd like to say, Pervez, please pass on our thanks to the IROs and for the work that they've been doing, particularly around during the pandemic. But can I ask then from the board, is everybody happy to accept the recommendation? And just find it on my screen. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much, everybody. Muchly appreciated. And thank you, Pervez.
Thank you.
Thank you. So my next item that I've got then is update on children missing. Who have we got here to do this?
We've got
Fiona. Hi, Fiona. Welcome. Oh. Thank you so much. I'll hand over to you now then, Fiona.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
There is a presentation that I think Lindsay's going to put up, but it is mainly bullet points on the things that I'm going to discuss. So obviously you'll have all had time to look at the report. What I want to start with is to say that this is 6 months worth of figures, not a quarter. So for anybody that's a little concerned that there's 450 missing episodes, it is a longer period of time, but I thought it was important to perhaps get a feel for what things have been like since April through to now, and the impact of COVID. So we've had 450 missing episodes for looked after children, and actually, as far as the missing protocol in general, 55.3% of missing episodes are they are children who are looked after. So the other what's that, 40 something percent are other children that are sometimes open to social care and early help, sometimes not known to us at all, and it might be our first dealings with. A majority of those missing episodes are down to a frequency of a very small group. So we unfortunately have a top 5 who have 290 of those episodes, and those young people are often in our own residential homes. I think there's a piece of work for us to do, and as I go on through the presentation you'll see that that's some of the actions around the work we're doing with our residential homes, as far as timeliness of reporting missing or too timely, looking at what sort of distraction, etc., and managing those things, but also about knowing where those young people are going, and I'll talk a little bit in detail as we move forward. Sometimes there's a challenge as far as return interviews for those young people, and obviously that's our way of understanding the why young people are going missing, where they're going, if they're prepared to share that with us. And because we've got a frequency of a small number of young people, that can make quite a challenge for social workers in the KIC team, because they can't be completed by residential staff. It's not appropriate. It needs to be the social worker. And a piece of work I've been doing recently, along with Kelly Ormond, who leads on missing, is to look at the return interview. So we've had some challenges, and we've moved to using Liquid Logic. It's a real onerous piece of work. And if you're thinking 290 episodes for 5 young people, that could be 60 return interviews a month, 9 a week for 1 member of staff. So we need to look at how we can make that more straightforward for a member of staff, more focused for the young person, and more focused for us as a missing team to just really be able to hone in on where young people are going. What's the reason for them going missing? Where are they going? And how might we disrupt some of those sort of things? So we are starting to do that work, and you know, it's interesting to listen to Andrew talking about Concordat. We've had to reinvigorate, I think, our relationships as far as Concordat and focus really hard on those young people. Also, at the same time, working more closely with the police around the monthly monitoring meeting. So there's a high-level monitoring meeting which goes ahead, which Kelly attends along with Mandy, Deputy Heads of Service. And what we were finding was that the monthly meetings we were having were then just a repeat of those discussions. So what we've tried to do is to refocus our monthly missing monitoring group meetings. So we know who the young people are. We've got a really good perspective on who those young people are. What we need to know now, or do now, is what we're going to do about them. How can we distract them? Do we know exactly where the hotspots are? So are there particular communities that they're going to, particular parks, those sort of things? So really hone in on that. And I think as part of contextual safeguarding, looking at the community responsibility, that actually if community leaders, if schools are aware of young people hanging around, that they're telling us, so we can actually look at how we disrupt and looking at those targeted interventions. If you could move the slide, Lindsay, you can see that Lindsay's much better at doing this than me. It would have been a nightmare if I'd have been in control. So some of the key things, as far as I looked after children, we've decided that we need to look at a much more focused induction for residential staff. So there's been a lot of changes in residential staff. They've had some real challenges. We've got to be sure that they're focusing and understanding the purpose of missing children and young people. So we're looking at a pack that looks at explaining purposes of missing protocol, purposes of the return interview, who completes them, what we need to do for residential staff. So again, looking at, as I've spoken about before, that focus on when do you report a young person missing, and balancing those that are an hour or 11 hours, because for me, and particularly as you move into winter, there's more concern, isn't there, as the nights get darker, if you've got a young person out and not back in by 10 o'clock. But if you've got a young person who's gone out in the morning after a difference of opinion with a worker, that actually, if you know that they come back within an hour and a half, do you report them missing? Or actually, do we stick with that 2 hours, 2.5 hours, dependent on the time of day, before a young person's reported missing? So it's that better understanding, and Kelly's working quite closely with Chris, who's the residential homes manager, to look at how we do that. We're also looking at creating a looked after children booklet around missing that we can share with partner agencies, independent homes and foster carers. So again, tying that quite closely in with Concordat, really, so that we've got some detailed information that enables people to understand why they're completing the return interviews and what are we going to do with that information, which brings me on to the shortened, more cohesive return interview for practitioners that we can pull data off. So actually I want to know that if of those 450 missing episodes, or those top 5, are there regular places they're going to? Do we know where they're going? And actually, what action can we then take to stop them going there? What's the disruption? And we want to, as Andrew talked about with the Youth Alliance, again, look at how we can tie in with the Youth Alliance, that if people are out and about, that they've got some good intelligence around where young people are going. We also want to offer, I think we've been very fortunate in early help and social care that we've been able to access some really good training around non-violent resistance. So that's about working with young people who offer challenging behaviour, particularly to parents and to adults, and how we manage that in a way that is more focuses on the way we manage things rather than focusing on the child being the problem. What we've not been very good at, and I'll admit to this, is supporting our residential staff to have some places on that course. So we've got some training coming up. We're still debating whether we do it virtually or face to face, but is to offer every residential home in the city a place on that MVR training, and then that additional supervision afterwards to support staff to manage it so that they can access reflective supervision afterwards, etc. But that should offer us an element of prevention from young people going missing, because I think we do know that children often go missing because there's been some disagreement about something. It's not been handled very well. There's probably raised voices and somebody storms out. And I think anybody who's a parent of a teenager can sort of identify with that. It's just that our young people are much more vulnerable. So actually offering our staff some different techniques to deal with that has got to be beneficial, really. And really to just work hard to strengthen the relationship between children in care and residential services and our role with missing. And Kelly's been working quite hard with Andrew to look at some clear data, to look at how we can focus on those 5 most vulnerable and make sure that we've got some more answers. And work with Concordat. So on the whole, it feels like over COVID, I don't think missing episodes has increased. I think we've been able to maintain it to, it's sort of plateaued and maintained. And I think there is an element of anxiety for young people about being out in the community. For those most focused 5, though, I think nothing stops them, and they're the ones we've got to focus on, those strategies to make sure we can support that. Really, any questions?
Thank you, Fiona. So I think for me, in sort of like having a look at the summary there that we need, it's a case of having that intelligence analysis of the where, why, when and how, and then finding those actions to help stop it and to disrupt that action. So I would be very keen to make sure that we have an updated report on in terms of how that is going for the future. And again, really pleased to hear about the joint working with the Youth Alliance and Concordat, etc. I think we've got a question from Sally. It says, can the MVR training be opened up to foster carers?
It's a difficult one, in as much that obviously it's quite an investment. So I wouldn't say no, but we'd have to look at how we we would fund it if you think about the numbers. But it's not so, it's something I'd be more than happy to talk to Sally about and look at, because we do offer through Kim Thompson and her systemic work some training around using MBR techniques, so not the complete evidence-based offer, but maybe that's something we could start with foster carers. I think it would be really, really good.
Yeah, that sounds like a good start into that then. I'd like to open up the floor then to anybody who has questions for Fiona there for us.
I think possibly what I should have focused on was one item in the report, which was that there was only the one case that was missing for over 72 hours, which required strategy discussion. And I think, you know, it's always worrying when a young person goes missing for 24, 48 hours, but when they go missing for over 72, it's much more of a concern. And, you know, it's not something to celebrate, because no young person really should be missing. But actually, it is a limited number that we get to a point where we don't have that trace for them.
And I think if we have a look at those recommendations that we've got in the report there, Fiona, I'm just going to read them out quickly for everybody. So it's to acknowledge progress made and actions to complete the future direction of travel. And then the next one for me is the important one, to explore how we can reduce the number of missing episodes with young people placed in Derby City Council residential homes. And then thirdly, to ensure that those that are looked after young people in our out of authority placements are monitored and supported appropriately. So I think that would, for me, those three recommendations put together will start looking more at that intelligence analysts and finding out, the who, what, where, when, why and how. So is everybody happy to accept those recommendations there?
Yes.
Thank you. Any final questions for Fiona? And again, thank you, Fiona, for putting that all together for us.
No
do
problem.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, right, next item on the agenda then is item 11, the Adoption East Midlands Progress Report, including the scorecard. Who is going to be presenting this for us? Because I understand Sue Ann's away today.
I'm doing that, Councillor Williams. It's Judy Levitt.
Hi, Judy. Thank you. I can hand over to you then. Thank you.
Thank you. So yes, there's two reports that you'll have seen. One was the report that I wrote, which is the annual adoption report, which is quite different to the last report that you'll have seen, because that included all our adoption data in the recruitment of adoption and the adult adoption side. The report that you'll have seen from me today is just about the children's adoption journey, because that's obviously the only bit that's remained being the responsibility of Derby City Council. And then the other report that you've been sent is the annual report for Adoption East Midlands, which is obviously our commissioned service. And Sue Ann sits on the board of that of Adoption East Midlands. So there's those two reports, but I'm just going to try and cover a little bit about Adoption East Midlands and adoption in Derby City.
Thank you.
So there's a bit of a presentation. Lindsay, have you got that? Can you share that for me?
Yep, I'll do that now, Judy. It's on its way.
Thank you. Okay, that's great. So as I explained, this is the adoption report and links with Adoption East Midlands. So can I have minutes? That's it, that's great. Okay, so I'm going to start talking about the Children's Adoption Permanence Team. So the pilot team was set up in July 2017, and that was part of the transfer, if you like, to Adoption East Midlands, all the other D2N2 local authorities had to have a permanence team to show their children's adoption journey. And so Derby City set up a pilot team, as I say, in July 2017. That was made up of 2 children in care social workers, 2 adoption social workers, and myself. So at that time I was managing the adoption team and the pilot team for the permanence team. That team was made permanent in April 2019, and we interviewed for the posts in that team, and the same people who'd been part of the pilot team were successful in getting the permanent posts, which was great because it just meant that we were able to work and build really on the successes that we'd had in the previous 2 years. So the team structure now for the Children's Adoption Permanence team, I manage the team, but there's actually 2 elements to it. So there's the adoption permanence side of the team, and then there's also the exit team. Obviously I'm not talking about the exit side today, but just so that you sort of like people understand the structure of it. If I just talk through now a little bit about the data and the progress over the last year. So children from Derby that have been placed in the East Midlands by Adoption East Midlands in 2019-20, of the 21 children that we placed, 17 of those were placed with AEM adopters. And that, in comparison to the numbers that we had before, was really, really high. People will appreciate that because Derby City is such a small local authority, we weren't often able to place our own children with adopters that we'd approved. Whereas now we're sharing adopters across Adoption East Midlands, it means that we can use our local adopters who are based possibly in Derbyshire, Nottinghamshire, Nottingham City. So that's provided us with better consistency in practice across D2N2. Obviously less distance to travel to support our placements, and we've developed really good working relationship with the adoption social workers in Adoption East Midlands. The numbers of children placed for adoption has been fairly consistent for the last few years. So in 2017 and 18 we placed 22 children. In 2018 and 19 we placed 22 children, and in 2019 and 20 we placed 21 children, so fairly consistent really. But later in my report I'm going to talk to you about what's happened this year, which is really good news, so I'll come to that in a little while. There have been shortfalls in placements for children who are considered harder to place. And it's continued, Adoption East Midlands have continued to have a problem really to find adoptive placements for sibling groups, BAME children and children with additional needs, and also children over school age. And AEM have stated in their report that their recruitment of adopters for those groups will be a priority in the coming year. Derby's data in the national scorecard, just to go through that a little bit, our performance scorecard continues to look poor in relation to comparator local authorities, and although we have improved in most indicators, our performance overall for the aggregated 3-year period, that's 2016 to 2019, we are worse than some other areas. I think that that's largely due to we've had a few sort of outlier cases for very hard to place children where we've waited significant periods of time, sometimes years, to find a really good adoption match. But for those children that we have waited for and we found a match, it's been a really, really good outcome for those children, and we've managed to achieve permanence for them. And I think if we sort of tip it on its head and see it as Derby City being very determined to be led by the positive outcomes for children rather than positive data, then I think it can be seen as, you know, a plus for Derby, even though on the scorecard it'll continue to make us look like we're perhaps not performing as well as other local authorities.
Absolutely, Judy, and I will make no apologies for that. When we've had discussions with ministers, we've always said we will always make sure that we keep trying for our children, and we're not going to say no just because it might be a bit too difficult. And I think that's a really important point to put over, and you have done that very well. We don't give up. We don't start saying, oh, this one's going to be too difficult, so we'll leave that, and it stays on there. So I think that is an important point. So thank you for raising that, Judy. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's great. Thank you. That's helpful. On a more positive note, Derby has made significant progress in the time between placement orders being granted, that's the authority to place a child for adoption, and identifying a match with prospective adopters. So, as well as comparing the 3-year data, analysis of the 1-year version of this indicator shows that Derby has more than halved the average number of days for this measure between 2017 and 2019. So in 2017, our average was 408 days between placement order and finding adopters, and in 2019 it was 171, so a lot less than half. So having the adoption permanence team has significantly helped in that second part of placing children from the placement order to linking with adopters. So then if we move on to the next slide, that's a little bit more about Adoption East Midlands. So in April 2019, we sadly for me, our adoption workers and post-adoption workers were all tupied over to Nottinghamshire County Council to be part of the Regional Adoption Agency, that's Adoption East Midlands. And although their base continued to be at the council house, over the year we have seen diminishing numbers of social workers basing themselves in our office, which has been a loss for us in terms of collaborative working. And obviously that's now been exacerbated by COVID because nobody's really in the council house. So I think probably that when we go back to being in the council house, that will probably be even less, that our Adoption East Midlands colleagues will base themselves in the council house because they've probably all got used to being, working at home. So home finding links with Adoption East Midlands. We were allocated fairly early on when Adoption East Midlands was established. We were allocated our own 2 home finders. So that's Claire and Joe, and they've been absolutely brilliant. So they've been our links with Adoption East Midlands. So there's the home finding team, I think there's about 8 altogether, but we've got our own 2 home finders that just home find for Derby City. So they produce our profiles, they link with other agencies outside of Adoption East Midlands to find adoptive parents. Claire, who's the social worker of our 2 home finders, she writes all our statements for final hearings regarding the likely chances of adoption. They arrange home finding events, for example, the profiling evenings, and then they attend our monthly tracking meetings to ensure that early matching where possible is done, and to ensure that there's no drift in any of our cases. And they're also, the home finders and myself and some of the other staff at Adoption East Midlands are also in the process of setting up adoption activity days. They won't be called that because we can't pinch that name from the people that originally set the adoption activity days up, but we'll be having similar events to that once we can meet again, once adopters and children can meet. That's been cancelled twice over COVID, but the plan is to go back to having those sort of informal opportunities for adopters and children to meet. Harder to place children. So in 2019-20, we had 4 children that needed to be placed outside of Adoption East Midlands. And of those children, 2 were part of a sibling group and the other 2 were both BAME, and weren't able to offer adopters that were a suitable ethnic match. So as I said earlier on, that's one of their priorities going forward, is to try and find more adopters who can consider our harder to place children. A little bit just about the panel structure and how this has worked. So all our panels, adoption panels, have moved over to Adoption East Midlands. So they now offer 5 panels a month across the area, and that's at least 1 a week. So previously we had 1 panel a month in Derby City, so obviously that gives us a lot more flexibility for booking panel dates, and we can, Derby City can book into any of those 5 panels. All matches for Derby City children continue to have their ADM decisions made by Sue-Ann Lim or Andy Smith, but approvals of adopters, obviously that's now done by the AEM panel advisors. ADM decisions for the approvals aren't made by Sue-Ann and Andy, but our matches for Derby City children are. So that's great, because obviously we've still got our consistency, and Sue-Ann knows all our cases. She's agreed the best interest decisions for the children, that adoption's the right plan, and then she sees the children coming back again for their matches. And then AEM do our support after adoption. So that is one of the areas where I've seen, I think, the biggest improvement. So through combining all the therapeutic services that are on offer across the whole of Adoption East Midlands, a much wider area, there's been a much wider range and availability of support for adopters after the adoption order's made. And in addition, the Adoption Support Fund continues to offer financial support so that children can quickly access both assessment and therapy. So that's been great with Adoption East Midlands. And then links with the other permanence teams. So I've continued to meet since July 2017 with the other 4 permanence team managers from Derby, Nottingham City, Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire County Council. We meet every month. We regularly share training. We're still in the process of completely aligning all our policies and practices across the East Midlands. And we're almost there with that. I think, you know, there's a lot of consistency now about our practice, but there's still always things that you can develop or new things that you can be looking at to improve things. And we also meet regularly with the managers from Adoption East Midlands, and so that's meant again that any teething problems or inconsistencies can be quickly ironed out, and I think it's been a really beneficial way of us all working together. So that's the Adoption East Midlands bit, and then the last slide is the looking to the future bit. So obviously the adoption reports that you've had only go up to March 2020. So I just wanted to update you all really on what's happened since March. So one of the difficulties over the last year has been the increase in referrals to CAPT and very, very high caseloads for the CAPT workers. And this has restricted our capacity to co-work during proceedings. So it was always the intention of the adoption permanence workers that they would write the child permanence reports for court. And that meant that we were co-working the cases right the way through proceedings. We'd written the permanence reports, we'd met the foster carers, we knew the children, and then when we started our home finding process we were in a really strong position because we already knew the families and children. And because of capacity we've not been able to pick up cases until the placement order's made. So we've not been helping with very many child permanence reports just because of capacity. But we've now obviously had agreement for a new social worker in the team, and she was able to start last week, and I'm hoping that by January we'll have been able to allocate all the cases coming through proceedings so that we can go back to the way that the team was set up to do the child permanence reports. And it'll mean that the specialist adoption workers are the people that are writing the reports, which will be really beneficial, I think, for Sue-Ann and the people that are approving the plans as well. So that's been great, and I'm looking to the future with that. And so then during lockdown, the social workers in the team and the AEM home finders have continued to work extremely hard to establish links for our children. And as a result, we've placed 35 children this year with their adoptive parents. Of these 35 children, 21 were placed with AEM families, and some larger sibling groups established permanence with their foster carers, and that included 2 sibling groups of 3 and 1 sibling group of 5. 11 children were placed with interagency placements as far away as Wales, Oxfordshire and London, and in January we'll be placing a child in Dorset, which will obviously be a very long journey, but that means that we've actually managed to find families for all of our children that were waiting. We've not got any children waiting now for adoptive families. And I'd anticipate that by the end of the year we'll have placed 50 children with their adoptive families, and that's more than double the number of children that have been placed in any of the last 3 years.
That is fantastic.
I know, it's been very, very busy, but I do feel incredibly proud of the team and the way they've worked in the last 7 months. They've continued to visit families and children and proceed with links, and they've offered the necessary intensive support post-placement, travelling across the country, using PPE, working with risk assessments. We're all become experts in completing risk assessments so that the placements have managed to continue despite the difficulties.
Wow, that is just an absolutely remarkable performance and outcome there, particularly in the middle of a pandemic as well.
Yeah.
So wow, that's just really, really good. And I see on the bottom of the slide there the impact to the courts. So I understand the courts have only just reopened recently, haven't they, as well?
Yeah, so we were very slow getting adoption orders. So although the numbers of children we've placed have been very high, it's just meant that workers' caseloads have just got higher and higher because we haven't been able to move them out the other end with the adoption orders. But just in the last couple of months, we've started to move them on. So I think we have now had 13 adoption orders so far this year. But yeah, it's been slow. Moving them out the other end, but we'll get there. And obviously next year it's going to look crazy, isn't it? Because having placed 50 children, we'll have 50 to get through the courts with adoption orders as well. Has anybody got any questions?
Can I just apologise first of all? My next door neighbour's just decided to start drilling, so if you do hear drilling noises, I'm so sorry. I have no control over that, but I do apologise. He seems to have stopped now. But any questions there for Judy and the team? Okay. Can I just again say it's just such exceptional performance. I'm so pleased, and putting that together with the way that you treat all the children in terms of never letting anybody go and always trying to find the placements for them. I'm really, really pleased with this. I think it's just really outstanding performance there. So thank you so much, Judy, and please can you pass on our thanks from the committee to the teams there, and the continued collaboration across all of the teams, both in City Council and over at EAM. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Let me have a look then. Are we happy to accept the recommendations in that report then?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Judy.
Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you. Oh, there it goes. Sorry. And everything is finally buzzing and writing off on me, so apologies again. So the next item then that we've got is the fostering agency report then. Let's see. Sally, if I can hand over to you, Sally.
Okay.
Thank you, and I shall switch my...
Hi, are you ready for me now?
Yes, please, Sally. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and hello, Chair. So I'm going to present the annual report for the fostering service. There should be 2 slides, Lindsay, which I hope you can put up for me.
Okay, I'll sort that now, Sally. I'm doing it now. Thank you.
Just while Lindsay does that, the bulk of the report is based on April 2019 through to March, end of March 2020. But I have also included some updated information for you, which sort of brings you up to date really from April this year through to September. The first slide is focusing really on the marketing and recruitment activity that the service has undertaken. And I mean, I have to say, we've had a really exciting year. We've had a very different approach to the work that the fostering service undertakes, and we've had full council-wide support in developing that. And that has come about because we, with Andy Smith's direction, really, we created the Corporate Fostering Board. And the report really does summarise that full year of work and the changes that we've been able to achieve. So although the first slide is marketing and recruitment, you can't separate it entirely from retention of foster carers, because one informs the other, really. So 18 months ago now, we set up the Corporate Fostering Board. And sitting under that board, we developed initially 3 work streams. Now, the work streams were really incredibly important in that each work stream had a different focus, but they were also including our existing foster carers. So the message really to our foster carers was, we value what you've got to say. We want to hear what you've got to say, and we want to look at any ideas that you have, really, in terms of trying to improve the delivery of the service. Those work streams did continue for the majority of the 12 months, but they reduced to 2 because it was felt that one of the work streams really overlapped both marketing, recruitment, and the pathway to retention work streams. So we dropped 1 and pulled the information into the 2 that were left. And then finally in March, April this year, we were able to actually close down the marketing work stream, because we felt that all of the objectives from that work stream had been met, and the Corporate Fostering Board were able to sign that off. So in summary, we've had a very, very busy year, and our inquiries overall have improved. And just to sort of help you recognise that, last year, for the same period, the previous year, we had 169 inquiries, whereas in this financial year that I'm reporting on, we had 304. So quite a significant uplift from that. And obviously that then leads into the number of information packs we can send out. So again, the previous report, we sent out 131. For this last financial year, we were able to send out 200. And it sort of feeds through into the whole of the actual application and recruitment process. So last year, I reported back to the Corporate Parenting Committee that we approved 11 mainstream foster carers, whereas this year I'm reporting that we've actually achieved a figure of 18. So there is a significant improvement there, and I have to say it's ongoing, and we're feeling really, really positive about some of the aspects that the corporate board has managed to achieve. So we in terms of the marketing, we have become a lot more digital and social media focused, and we now pay for Google AdWords, which means that anybody who's going into the search engine, we come up very quickly at the top of that list. And we know from monitoring that, and our communications officer does the bulk of that for us, we know that our inquiries are increasing because we are using Google AdWords. The sales and marketing work stream, as I mentioned earlier, we have closed that down, but they did complete on a number of actions throughout the 12 months. And also developed our new recruitment strategy, which I hope you've got as an attachment to the report. The previous strategy was a 3-year strategy, and we've now decided to make it an annual strategy so that we are continuously looking at the needs of our looked after children, where the greatest demand is, where our sufficiency challenges are, and therefore updating the marketing strategy to reflect that. I mean, currently it's very much along the lines of needing foster carers for older children and sibling groups. So in terms of a regional developments, we I have included in the report that Derby City is actually part of a regional programme to recruit and assess and approve foster carers who have a specific interest in unaccompanied asylum seeking children. And this project is being funded by the government, the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, but it is led by Leicestershire County Council on behalf of the East Midlands. Now, unfortunately, they did have to delay some of their launch material and their launch date because of COVID, and that project has actually only gone live from the 1st of October this year, so there was quite a significant delay in that. The overall aim is that the team established for that project will do the recruitment and assessment work, but the applicants that come from Derby City will come to Derby City's fostering panel, so they will become Derby City foster carers. And I attend those board meetings to sort of keep abreast really of the work that they're doing. And also it helps me to understand what's happening from a regional perspective as well. So moving on to the retention slide, please, Lindsay. Thank you. So another exciting development for us in the last 12 months has been the implementation of our payment for skills, and this took an awful lot of work actually in terms of creating the framework for the scheme, briefing our existing foster carers on why we were going to introduce a different system, which replaced the old, what we used to call fee payments. And we felt that the old system was not a very fair way of showing our foster carers that we valued and recognised their skill base. And some foster carers would be paid an additional fee for a child in placement, whereas others wouldn't. And you know, there was a lot, it just didn't feel like it was an equitable scheme really. So we've worked really hard this year to review all of our existing foster carers, help them understand the criteria for the scheme, take them through or present them to what is called our Payment for Skills panel, and agree with them the fee payment level that they should be on. And it's very clear within that scheme how they can progress from one level to the next and achieve the sort of training and qualifications that they are seeking. We've had some challenges with that because we've got some very long-standing foster carers who were very used to the old fee payment scheme and were not quite so keen on doing the training that we now require them to do. So the new scheme really sets out the training programme that we expect carers to comply with, alongside developing their skills to care for our children in the most satisfactory way, really. And all of this scheme has been put together to help improve outcomes for children. We strongly believe that the more skilled our foster carers are and the more informed they are, the better able they are to actually care for the children that they have in placement. One of the outcomes from the work under the remit of the Corporate Fostering Board has been to look at our IT systems and how, as key workers, because you have to remember that foster carers are key workers, how we actually get them on board with being able to access the IT systems in a more efficient way. So it was agreed to undertake a lean review. So we have had a complete overhaul, really, in terms of looking at all of our processes and systems and how we can improve on that, make it less complicated for people that might be making that initial inquiry, but also to allow foster carers to use the IT systems that we have in place to support the work that they're doing. And, you know, that involves how they keep their records, how they're using secure email systems, how they can access their training records, etc. The customer satisfaction survey that we undertook, again, that sat within the marketing work stream and was completed earlier in the year. I think I'd have to say that overall it was an extremely positive response. We felt that we had a reasonable number of foster carers that actually gave us the time to complete and answer the questions in a very honest way. There was some very positive comments about Derby City Council. I suppose the one that we know about, and it's an ongoing issue really, has for us, I think, in terms of the impact on children and young people, is the change and turnover of children's social workers and what that actually means for children themselves, but also for foster carers who put an awful lot in and invest an awful lot in terms of their professional relationship, and then having to start all over again because a social worker might change jobs or leave for whatever reason. So I think that turnover of staff has been an ongoing problem, issue for foster carers and children in placements generally. The comments were very clear in terms of where they would like to see improvements, and we did do an exercise with the marketing officer to coordinate and analyse the data that we got back, and we put that together in a newsletter email for the foster carers so they could see, generally they could all see what was being said and how we were trying to go and take work forwards. Another advantage of the outcome of the work that the corporate board have been doing is to, again, as key workers, look at how we can include foster carers in the Derby Perks scheme that Derby City employees have access to. We have had some complications with that because obviously foster carers are not employees. So our colleagues in HR have been looking at that specifically for us. There's a couple of tweaks, I think, to that, but I'm really hopeful that that will be launched fairly soon. In terms of recruitment and retention, we've worked quite closely with Derby Homes, and reports were submitted to outline and show how we can support either newly approved foster carers who are interested in fostering larger sibling groups, or where foster carers who have fostered for a number of years but might want to increase the number of placements they can offer us, looking at how we can support a housing move. And we've certainly, as far as I'm aware, I know that we've actually managed to do that at least for one friends and family foster carer since April. The Corporate Fostering Board also produce a newsletter, again, which goes out to all of our foster carers to make sure that we're keeping them informed and listening to what they have to say, really. And I think the listening to them and they help us to understand what the challenges are for them. And we ensure as a service that we are doing all we can to provide the right level of support and training and supervision. So that was the sort of a bit of a tour really of some of the most important aspects of the work that we did last year. But I mean, just to sort of reiterate what we were saying and what Judy's been saying, the role of our foster carers in terms of moving children onto adoption has been absolutely crucial, and they've really stepped up to be part of transitions and helping carers deal with the anxiety of doing that piece of work during a pandemic. So the carers that have done that have been absolutely remarkable. Some of them have moved more than one child onto adoption as well. So it's aspects of their work that, you know, they didn't know they were going to be doing this in this way. They didn't know that they were going to be supporting children with virtual contact sessions and using Skype. They didn't know that they would be coming to panels in a which is now a virtual panel. So lots and lots of changes really for them. And I just have to say, Yvonne, they've really, really stepped up. So I'm really proud of the work that they've been doing.
Absolutely.
I'm going to stop there because there might be some questions that people, you know, want to ask me about anything in the report.
Yeah, if I can open the floor there to Sally just before I do that again, Sally, totally just to reinforce what you just said there, the team have worked extremely well to do this, and even things like the recruitment sessions, you know, going online, but still attracting so many new foster carers. I'm so sorry for the drilling. So really well done to the team there. Yeah. And again, any questions from the floor for Sally there?
I think just as well to add, although we've managed to increase our mainstream approvals, the other thing that is happening currently, and I think this is COVID related, is the increase in the friends and family assessments that we're doing. And that has, you know, that is almost doubled. So again, as I've said previously, really, they tend to be the more complex assessments because they're extended family members. Great for the children when it works out well. And also, I suppose, just to finish off, really, is looking at, I mean, nobody's asked, if they want to ask me about the deregistrations, we are below the national average in terms of our deregistrations, and out of the 21 in that year that I've reported on, only 10 were due to foster carers deciding for themselves that it was time to retire. The other reasons, some of them are just really good outcomes for children, because it might be that they've gone on to special guardianship orders, or the child themselves has moved on and returned home. So lots of different reasons for deregistrations. But we knew, didn't we, at the beginning of our corporate board work, that we needed to change our age profile. And that is happening now, and we can see that with the inquiries coming through. And also, I'm really pleased that we've got inquiries coming through from other local authorities and independent fostering agencies. So I think the payment for skills and the way it's, it's there on our website, it's clear, it's easy for people to see. It's all really positive.
Absolutely, Sally. Oh, so sorry about this noise. Have we got any questions for Sally there? I shall take the silence apart from the drill as no questions. Are we happy to accept the recommendation on the report?
I should have mentioned, actually, Yvonne, it's for the statement of purpose as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And that does go on the website once it's signed off.
Fabulous, thank you. So if we can take the recommendations and the statement of purpose, I'm getting yeses in the box there. So Again, so sorry for this noise interruption, but thank you, Sally. And again, please pass on the board's thanks to the team. And ladies and gentlemen, I do believe that is the end of the meeting. I'm hoping, just looking at my papers to make sure I'm not jumping ahead. No, I have nothing left on the agenda. So can I say once again, thank you so much for all of your help and advice, and to those that have put into reports to us today, thank you very much. We really do appreciate the work that you and your teams do for looking after our children, muchly appreciated. So be safe, take care, and we will see you next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.